Call
Yes.
the roll.
Good evening, everyone. I'll go ahead and take roll. I'll begin with Director Gould.
Present.
And Orzali.
Present.
Wood.
Present.
Sheets.
Present.
Kelly, I see you virtually.
Present.
Jones.
I'm here.
White.
Here.
Director Clark, I believe, has left, will not be joining us immediately for regular session. President Saylor's turning it back over to you.
Thank you very much. Next is the pledge to the flag. Please recite after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we have the Metro Cable announcement. The open session meeting is videotaped for Cablecast on Metro Cable 14, replayed on Sunday, May 29th at 2 p.m. and Monday, May 30th at 6 p.m. on Channel 14, webcast at metro14live.saccounty.net. Now we have the public opportunity to discuss matters of public interest within the district's jurisdiction, including items on or not on the agenda. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers tonight?
Good evening, everyone. I do not believe there's any speakers at the moment. Art, if you could unmute our participants.
There were quite a few, so just give me a moment. Easier, have you don't unmute yourselves. If there's anything you'd like to present to the board at this time, please. Looks like no response.
All right, having no speakers tonight, our next item on the agenda is the consent items. Do we have any questions about the consent items?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we adopt consent.
I'll second.
Thank you. Having a motion in a second. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Director Gould.
Aye.
Orzali.
Aye.
Wood.
Aye.
Sheets.
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
White.
Aye.
And Sailors.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda are presentation items. The first presentation is number 1, the recruitment and outreach update. Firefighter Tim White. Good evening.
It's fast. I want to thank everybody for coming out to support me. All you guys in the back.
Well played.
Good evening, President Sailors, members of the board, Fire Chief Harms and staff. I'm Firefighter Tim White, and this will be a report on recruitment and outreach efforts here at Metro Fire. I think we would all agree that historically, a career in the fire service typically starts with a little bit of luck, followed by a lot of hard work and dedication in order to be successful. That little bit of luck typically comes in the form of someone that we have direct access to that works in the fire service, first making this career seem obtainable, then providing us with some information in order for us to formulate a pathway towards this career. I consider it my role as our recruitment and outreach coordinator to identify what that information is and seek out opportunities to make that information available, to reproduce that luck, if you will, for as many people as possible, starting with your constituents here within our district, and also to reach outside of our region to highlight employment opportunities here at Metro Fire. Now, what does that look like operationally? We're working with our PIO's office on social media projects that have made improvements to our website, joinmetrofire.org, to provide easier access to up-to-date information and resources. We are pursuing opportunities to visit with local and not so local college campuses that have fire and EMS training programs and have highlighted Metro Fire to multiple EMT, paramedic, and fire academies. We have been present at our local high schools for career fairs, career-related presentations, and we're building relationships with guidance counselors in an effort to share information on how best to guide students that are interested in pursuing a career with us. We're partnering with the Del Campo High School Fire Tech CTE program for career exposure and workforce development. Current Del Campo Fire Tech students were able to visit our academy earlier this week on Monday, and some of our members assisted them with mock interviews just yesterday. Our partnership with the United States Army PAYS program continues to grow, utilizing one of the most diverse and well-funded workforce development programs in the world. We were able to be part of the 2022 U.S. Army Recruiting and Reserve Partnership Council, and future soldiers continue to engage with us for future employment. We continue to work with our regional partners and CPF resources to increase Metro Fire's visibility within our future workforce. For instance, 2 of our firefighters were supported as they were able to participate as counselors at the Golden State Women in the Fire Services Hero Camp at UC Davis this April. Metro Fire was also highlighted in 2 interviews with the Future Firefighter podcast that were featured on fireengineering.com, and both of them made the newsletter. These interviews cover topics from our mentor program to the single role paramedic program as a pathway, and what our district has to offer candidates as a whole. And we're following up with all these efforts by making ourselves available through our mentor program, offering career guidance all along the way. The flexibility of my current position and the support that it has received has afforded us the opportunity to be consistently available for recruitment and outreach opportunities, to have a voice on multiple committees, and perhaps most importantly, to meet people where they are. It was very rewarding to see some of the folks that I've met out there at our SRP written test last week. And I look forward to seeing a continued return on this investment that we're making in our future workforce. I want to thank Fire Chief Harms and the administrative staff for their support, patience, and trust while I've been working on this project. Thank you to the board for supporting this project and recognizing the need, excuse me. And also thank you to the line for the support that our recruitment efforts continue to receive. Unless there are any questions for me, this concludes my report.
Do you have any questions from any board members? Go ahead, Director Rosales.
Do we have presently any data about who becomes one of our candidates, where they come from, how old are they, educational background?
We don't, that I'm aware of. I probably shouldn't speak to, this is probably a better answer for HR, but my understanding is that we're restricted to the information, the data that we're allowed to collect during the hiring process.
Mm-hmm. I understand. Or there is data that's valuable, that's within our purview. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. I think it's something we should pursue.
Thank you for the question. I'll look into it.
Yes, go ahead.
Firefighter White, thank you so much for the presentation. It's been good. Glad to hear all the work that's going on. You did mention the Army. Are you working much with any of the other branches and or the California Veterans Affairs Department?
Primarily, we've had most wins with the United States Army because of the program that they've developed. We've been PAYS partners since 2011 and haven't had any interaction with them until January of this year, when I just decided to learn about the program. The United States Army is beneficial to us, not only through the PAYS program, but the way that they train a couple of their MOSs, primarily combat medic and paramedics. There's opportunity to be career ready for us when they come out, unlike the rest of the military branches that don't have civilian credentials right now for their medical professionals. So part of what I was able to do at that partnership council is to interact with leadership up and down the state that recruit that work at Army recruiting stations and educate them to our ask and what career pathways they should guide folks towards if they do want to pursue a career with us in the fire service. And primarily it's that point them towards becoming a paramedic. And there is an opportunity through the United States Army to come out with civilian credentials.
That's good. And I know Cal Veterans Affairs has got the transition assistance program for members of the service that are coming out. And I didn't know if we had a connection there yet or not.
Could we get together on that?
Yeah. I'll reach out to you on that.
Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Once again, thanks for your presentation tonight. I appreciate it. Have you had much interaction with CPF regarding the pre-apprentice program that they're now running down south and the paramedic program that they're about to launch for workforce development?
Yeah, I've been working with Lasana Packman over there to try and learn about those resources and pathways and how we can interact with them and support those processes. One of the committees, the Regional Diversity Committee meetings that I attend, she's part of that as well. And so oftentimes she'll bring up stuff that I need to follow up with her on to learn about some of that stuff, some of those resources. Just had a conversation 2 weeks ago with Lasana about how we can try to push people towards that program if that's an opportunity for them. And they do a really good job for recruiting for themselves and for the industry at large. And again, yeah, trying to build those relationships and see where we fit in, how can we support that process, how we can utilize them through CPF resources such as like printing documents, advertising. There is a lot of resources over there through the CPF and through the CalJack.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
No more questions? Thank you very much for your presentation.
President Sailors?
Yes, go ahead.
I'd just like to say that Tim was very happy as a firefighter on Truck 106. And quite a few months ago, we asked him to kind of doing this part-time, to come to staff and begin to do this job full-time. And he has been tremendous. And I see him on social media. He stops by my office. He really is being able to do this full-time, becoming the face of recruitment out there for the district. So Tim, thank you for that. And only 6 more months to go.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. Our next presentation item is other post-employment benefits, OPEB, actuarial valuation for our year ending June 30th, 2022. CFO Dave O'Toole and Catherine McLeod.
Good evening, Madam Chair, board members, Chief Harms. This item, OPEB actuarial valuation for fiscal year ending June 30, 2022 is being brought to you today for presentation and no action is required. In a moment, Catherine McLeod of McLeod Watts, an actuarial consulting firm with whom we worked for several years, will be presenting the highlights of the most recent valuation. And it's included in the board package, the evaluation. The district provides benefits to its retirees in the form of medical coverage and other benefits not covered by a pension plan. With that obligation, the district must file certain accounting reports, and benefits will be sufficient to ensure that benefits will be sufficiently funded and available when needed. That OPEB valuation is prepared biannually for the purposes of determining the contribution levels for the pre-funding plan, providing information needed for the CalPERS benefit trust, the CERP contributions you're familiar with, and disclosing certain information needed for accounting reports. The report considers the obligations of the district, including explicit subsidies, the district contributions towards healthcare, and implicit subsidies, contributions from active employees that are benefiting retirees. The OPEB actuarial valuation presented concludes that the district's net position or share of assets over liabilities is 26.1%, or will be 26.1% as of June 30th, 2022, up from 19.6% last year on June 30th, which was up from 17.5% on June 30, 2020. This improvement in funded level is largely due to market performance, as well as the district commitment to contributing to the CERT. So with that overview and background, I want to turn it over to Catherine, who will be presenting via Zoom.
Great, thank you for having me. Do I have the microphone now?
Yes, you do.
You're good.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Let me just get my presentation in front of me here. I need to also share my screen, I believe. So let me get that going as well. Okay, can you confirm if you can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. All right, well, I'm going to just give a very brief overview. I'm happy to take any questions whatsoever about our report or the OPEB plan in general. But let me just kind of go through these slides. I know this is something that the board does not think of too often. And so the terminology alone can be confusing. So let me just provide a little bit of recap about this information. So the primary purpose of this report, as was just explained, is we prepare information on behalf of the district for both accounting or audit purposes, as well as for plan funding purposes. And the particular report that we just delivered to the district provides information for both purposes. The basics, just a real high level background, the basics of the actuarial valuation, whether it's a pension program valuation or other post-employment benefits, the basic approach that the actuary follows is the same. We start by confirming the plan eligibility and benefits to answer the question of who gets how much for how long. We need to make many assumptions about what's going to happen between the valuation date and the future when all those benefits will be paid. Then we put a price tag on every future expected benefit payments out in the future, and then discount each of those payments back to today's dollar. And when we collect those up for every person and all of their expected future benefits, we call that the present value of future benefits. That's a logical name. And then the next step is for us to allocate the cost of those future benefits for each person to the years that we expect the person to work, because the district is expected to account for the value of those benefits over the working lifetime of each employee. So it's our job to allocate what we think the projected future cost of those benefits paid in retirement are and allocate them over the years when they're working. And so we divide those into 3 buckets. As of any valuation date, there's a certain amount of past service years each person has already worked. So that past service liability is named either the total OPEB liability for accounting purposes, or it's called the actuarial accrued liability for funding purposes. And part of that future benefit cost is assigned to the current year being worked by employees. And so that current service cost is called service cost or normal cost. And a portion of the future benefits for active employees is going to be assigned in the next year and the following year and so on while they're expected to finish out working for the district. So the collection of those 3 portions of cost allocations add up to that present value of future benefits for each person. So that's the gist of what we're doing. In preparing the valuation, we have to answer a number of questions, and those questions form the basis for our assumptions. Those are things like, how long will retirees receive benefits? Is it for lifetime? Is it only to age 65, et cetera? And that's going to affect things like our mortality assumption or life expectancy. Will dependents get any benefit in this district's program? Yes, they do. Both spouses and dependent children are entitled to retiree health benefits. So we need to know if those are payable while the retiree is living or as survivors. And in the district's program, it includes survivor benefits. We have to anticipate whether the value of benefit is going to increase in the future. And that forms an assumption on healthcare trend or potentially bargained increases if those are applicable. And then additional assumptions include things, particularly for active employees. Will this current employee actually stick around with the district and retire from this agency? Unlike pension benefits, this is a very important assumption, because in pension benefits, if an employee terminates and moves to another public employer, they will still have a vested future benefit from their years of service with the district. For retiree medical benefits, unless they actually retire from the district and start their pension benefit within just a few months of retiring, any retiree medical benefit is forfeited. So that assumption about whether an employee will stick around and actually retire from your district is a very important assumption. And then if they do retire, what age will they retire? Will they take the coverage of benefits, et cetera? Will they cover dependents? Which plan will they choose? And so on and so on. So there are many assumptions involved in preparing the evaluation. And as part of our process, we review those assumptions with the district, and we are more than happy to discuss why we chose what we chose. And if the district believes that there's other factors that we didn't consider, we are more than happy to incorporate those in our analysis. As was briefly mentioned, an OPEB valuation has technically three different types of liability that we have to value. The first is the obvious one that everybody thinks about, and those are the cash benefits or premium benefits that the district would pay for retiree health coverage. And that is, according to formula and according to resolution with CalPERS, how much does the district pay for, up to a maximum for any individual retiree and or their spouse or other dependents. In this program, we call that generally anything that falls in that bucket an explicit or direct subsidy. And in this program, that represents about 80% of the liability in this program. The next most significant liability is what was mentioned as the implicit subsidy. It's a kind of a hidden premium subsidy that retirees receive prior to Medicare when the premium rate is blended together. But we all know that as we get older, not every individual human, but in general, as we age, our healthcare costs go up. So in the program where everybody pays the same premium rate, regardless of age or health conditions, in general, the older and pre-Medicare retirees are getting more claims paid than the premium cost. And so effectively, the active employee premiums that are collected, either from the employees themselves or from the district, part of that premium collected for them is being rerouted behind the scenes to help cover a portion of the retiree claims that are bigger than their premiums. And that is required for accounting purposes to be considered a liability of the employer because the retiree is actually getting that benefit of the higher claim cost. That represents about 20% of the cost of this plan. And the last little tiny bit, which is actually in your case a negative cost, is recognizing that you're in a very large pool with CalPERS and different retirees have different costs, et cetera, based on the composition of your Medicare retirees within the pool of all the CalPERS Medicare retirees. We have to assess whether or not one employer's retirees are contributing more premium cost than their claims or less. And in the district's case, we're projecting that the premium cost collectively for your Medicare retirees is slightly higher than the actual claims that we expect that they would incur. So you actually get a little credit on your liability for that. I thought I'd just take 1 minute. You already have established your trust, but it's always good to kind of revisit, why are we doing this? Is this a good idea to have a trust and to set aside money here? So I thought it was good to kind of recap this. The most immediate reason that people think of is to benefit them for their financial statement, their accounting liability. And that is, if you don't have a trust established for accounting purposes, the employer has to report the liability assuming a very low, a 20-year bond rate to discount the liability. The lower your discount rate, the higher your liability on your books. So in today's world, a 20-year municipal bond index might be around 2%. So if we had to revalue your liability using a 2% rate, you might see it be 2 to 3 times higher than what you're seeing on your books right now. So that is an immediate benefit for doing it. Another real benefit is that the more money that's set aside in the trust, your earnings in that trust are expected to be higher. And you can actually offset the liability on your books by the asset value that you set aside. So if you had set aside assets, in your reserves and your own district resources, but didn't put in a trust, you could not recognize that as an offset to this liability. By isolating in the trust, you can do that. So that's an added value of setting up the trust. And then from the participant's point of view, you've made some benefit commitments. And so it improves the benefit security for them, the members, to have actually see a trust aside and setting money aside for that. Cost of borrowing is typically improved by having a trust and a reduced liability on your books. And then overall, the general concept of taxpayer equity to be funding the plan during the years when your taxpayers are receiving the benefits is always a good advantage. So given that in mind, this next slide looks at the different kind of levels of funding that can happen in a plan. Just a reminder that unlike the CalPERS retirement system, pre-funding of an OPEB plan is not required. So this is a decision that the board makes according to what it deems suitable use of its funds, but this is an optional decision to make. I've just covered the benefits or pros of doing that. When assuming a trust is set up, the next question is, well, at what level are you going to fund? Since it's optional, there is no mandate that you contribute the actuarially determined contribution like there is for the pension program, but contributing at that level certainly has some benefits. So if the district were to contribute at a level that's more than 0 to the trust, but less than the level that the actuary determines and recommends for funding. Then for accounting purposes, we have to consider the fact that the trust will never be likely be sufficient to pay all the future benefits. You're never going to get all the way there if you don't contribute at the level the actuary recommends. So in that event, we wouldn't use a bond rate to calculate the liability, and we couldn't use the full trust rate. We'd have to blend something in between based on the established or recent historical level of funding in the plan. And in the district's case, that was the circumstance last year or the year before. There was a blending of a discount rate. And that in the current report we delivered was also the case, that there was a blending of a discount rate. It's much closer to the trust rate of return than to the bond rate, but it's not up at the full trust rate because the district, at least according to its current funding policy, is not contributing the full level that we've recommended. Here's just a quick snapshot of the funding progress in the plan. So you can see the trust has not been around that long, and still in recent years, it's pretty impressive how in roughly 6 years, 5 to 6 years, you've gone from a 0% funded ratio up to about 27%. So that's a very impressive accumulation of funds towards this very substantial liability in just 5 or 6 years. And here, now I'm going to get to the specifics of, I want to make sure I'm getting the right slide here, the specific results from this recent valuation we completed. Again, I mentioned that the liabilities are prepared in this report for both funding purposes and for accounting purposes. So this first slide that I'm showing here summarizes the results of our evaluation based on the assumption that the district were to fund at the full recommended level. And so for this purpose, we assess the liability using the full expected trust rate of return. And in this case, based on the most recent information that we've received from CalPERS, this was information released in March of 2022. So we use that information and our projections of the district's benefits for future retirees to produce a return of 6.21% on average over the lifetime of the plan. So from that, we developed that present value of projected benefits. I talked about the total future benefit value for all the current 1,402 members to be about $351 million. That's broken out between that explicit or cash payment of premiums portion and that implicit subsidy, that hidden subsidy from active employees to retirees. And that's roughly what I was saying is about an 80-20 split. So that 351 million or so, we then allocate that to past service, current year service, et cetera. And the past service part of this is about $257 million. And that's labeled in for funding purposes as the actuarial accrued liability. So $257 million or so. And from that, we compare that to the plan assets that have been set aside. So how much has been accumulated to date toward the funding of that past service liability. And that's just a hair under $70 million as of June 30, 21. Subtracting that leaves about 188 million in unfunded liability considered from this plan funding point of view. So, and we're also then assigning about $8.3 million in current service cost or normal cost. So those are the components of what develop how we would determine how much to fund in this plan for this year. So we've got 187 or $88 million in unfunded liability that we're going to have to figure out how to get paid off, plus 8.3 million in current year service cost. And those two pieces go into how we determine the actuarially determined contribution amount. This next page shows pretty much the same information, but from an accounting point of view. And so in here, notice two differences. It's essentially the same exact information with two differences. One is the discount rate is different. So on the prior one, we were using the expected trust rate of return because we were assuming for funding purposes that you could fund the full benefit level. For accounting purposes, we know according to your current that that's not planned. So we had to blend that trust rate of return with a bond rate, and we came up with an expected weighted or blended return or discount rate of 5.9%. And the result of that is that all of those numbers that we saw on the prior page now are increased a little bit, because with a lower discount rate, the liability numbers go up a little bit. So what was on the previous page, I'm going to skip back to look real fast, 351,000 for the present value future benefits is now $371,000. Excuse me. It's now $371,000. And the actuarial accrued liability is now $267 million. And the assets are the same. So your unfunded liability is now a little bit higher than it was as well. So the difference on this page, besides the discount rate change, is that the labels on the left are different. They're the same conceptual numbers, past service liability, assets, et cetera. But for accounting purposes, they all get different labels. So what was on the prior page as actuarial accrued liability, here is called total OPEB liability for accounting purposes. And what was the plan assets on the prior page is called fiduciary net position, et cetera. So same things, different labels. Okay. So the next thing we do after we finish the valuation is we go through and we look at the prior valuation results, and we look at what we expected would have happened between that prior valuation and the current valuation, and say, what did we expect would have happened and what actually happened? And did we change some things? Did we feel some changes for the future were warranted? So this page just kind of briefly summarizes some of those things. The accounting liability was about $5.1 million higher than expected. Luckily, trust assets were about $10.5 million higher than expected. So the difference was about $5.4 million lower difference, net unfunded or unfunded liability, $5.4 million lower than expected. That's a great result. The key reasons for those differences were the discount rates, number one, were lowered for both funding and accounting as a result of those new CalPERS expected returns that I mentioned. So both the liabilities went up mostly because the expected return on trust assets went down. But offsetting that were substantially higher investment earnings on the trust assets in the last 12 months. So the expected return on assets at that time was about 6.95%, but the actual return between June 30, 20 and June 30, 21 was about 27%. So it was a phenomenal year, and that really offset the increase for the other reasons. There were also some minor, what we call plan experience results that were favorable. And that means things like we assumed premiums would increase by some percentage between 2019 and 2021. And they did increase, but they increased by less than we projected, that sort of thing. So from that information I mentioned earlier, we we develop the OPEB contribution levels we recommend. So this top chart here is what is the actuarially determined amount, meaning the amount that we would recommend to fully fund over a period of time the full benefit liability. So in developing that, we took that unfunded liability I mentioned earlier, which I think was about $87 million. We took that unfunded liability and we assumed that would be amortized over a remaining number of years. And that produces an amortization payment. And we added that to your service cost, and that determined for fiscal year ending 21, the sum of those two numbers came up with an actuarially determined contribution of just a hair over $21 million. And for the following year, it goes up a little bit to about 21.6 or $7 million. Those are our recommended amounts that would systematically over a finite period of time pay off the liability, unfunded liability, and keep up with the accruing service costs each year. Those amounts of money, that full 21 million would not need to all be committed to the trust, because in fact, the district is directly paying retiree benefits right now. So the payment of those retiree benefits can be counted as a payment toward this funding requirement. So in this chart here at the top, we show the sources of funds that we think would be needed to to satisfy that full funding of each year's ADC. And we've got about 11.1 million that we think would come from the payment of benefit dollars on behalf of the retirees. There's another 3.3 million that we think is coming indirectly from higher active premiums that are being rerouted to retiree costs. So the sum of those two things right there is more than $14 million toward that $21 million EDC level. And that leaves about 6.6 million for next year that would need to be committed to the trust in order to get to the full funding level. The next chart below shows what we understand to be the district's actual funding approach. And that is to pre-fund nothing toward the implicit subsidy liability, that 20% of liability that is not really cash dollars paid out to retirees, but covers that indirect subsidy from active to retirees. If the district doesn't want to pre-fund that, but just wants to pre-fund the portion of benefits it's actually going to pay out in cash premium benefits, then this lower chart covers that. And the funding that we think would need to cover that is about 15.57 million for fiscal year 23, and about 16 million for the following year. So in order to satisfy that funding level, again, there's about 11.1 or $2 million in retiree benefit payments this first year, and that would leave about 4.4 million that would need to go to the trust, and the following year, roughly 4.5 million to go to the trust. So this next slide here, I mean, it addresses a question that was posed to us. If, in fact, the district maintains its commitment to pre-funding the explicit subsidy or direct premium benefits only, but does not pre-fund that implicit subsidy liability, obviously at some point, you're going to pay down the unfunded liability for those direct payments, but you won't have paid down any of the unfunded liability for that implicit portion. So the question comes, what ultimately will that look like? So we've illustrated a couple of things here on request. One is to say, what if the top part says, what if the district elected to contribute the full actuarially determined contribution amount each year? What would happen? Well, the amortization period that we're using to pay off that unfunded amount is 20 years right now. So, and you can see it starting up there at about 183 or something million. And so paid out, if you contributed the full actually determined amount over that 20 years, you'd see that go down to zero. And now again, you can see on the left, the comment I made, we're assuming that all of our assumptions today will be exactly realized. And that's not going to happen, it never does. But assuming that we're close or if to the extent that we're off, that we adjust for it next year and so on, the expectation is at the end of 20 years that unfunded liability would go to zero. This next chart illustrates two different things. One is, suppose the district just continues its policy of pre-funding the explicit subsidy liability only. Well, you can see it's starting at the same place, 180 million or 183 million or so, but at the end of 20 years, you're not going to have contributed anything toward that implicit subsidy unfunded. And in the meantime, there will have been more service costs for that implicit unfunded. It's going to go up over time, not being funded. So at the end, if you just look at the solid green line, at the end of 20 years, we would anticipate that there would be a remaining unfunded liability of what looks to be like $83 million or so from unfunded implicit subsidy liability. Now that implicit subsidy liability started off at just 52 million, and the explicit unfunded liability started off at 134 million. But you're going to pay off that explicit liability, and you're not going to pay off the implicit. And so the implicit is going to grow over time with interest, et cetera. And at the end of that 20 years, we would anticipate that there would be roughly an $82 or $83 million remaining unfunded liability. Those are the end of my kind of prepared comments, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Anyone have any questions? Go ahead, Director Jones.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Is it McLeod?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. McLeod. So a few slides back, one had the 17 contribution and one had actual 15. So does that mean if Metro contributed 2 million more annually, that would help us reach that the long arc for the whatever it was, ADC?
Yes.
And that includes the implicit?
Correct. When you're not considering funding for the implicit, we count that as a contribution source. So if you're focused on funding of the explicit or direct benefit payments only, we can't count that implicit as toward funding. So we ignore that. But if you're going to fund toward the entire actuarially determined contribution, then you can count that implicit subsidy contribution in there as part of your contribution source. So you're correct that if you opted to fund for the full actuarially determined contribution, instead of just the explicit, you'd be looking at roughly a 2 million, somewhere between 2 million and 2.3 or 4 million additional contribution to the trust.
Dave, just to be clear, we're doing the approximate 15 million payment, and if we upped it, the extra 2 million to the trust, then we avoid the blending of the discount rate, ma'am, is that the case? And then that will help us get to that 20-year goal of zero liabilities within the framework that you presented?
That is correct, yes. With one caveat, in order to get to the full trust rate of return, you can't jump there all in 1 year, because to get to full trust return for accounting purposes, we have to look at a recent 5-year historical average of funding. So if your most recent 5-year average of funding, as a percent of the full ADC is only 92%, getting to 100% in 1 year isn't going to move that 5-year average up to 100 right away. So we'd have to, it's going to ease in, but yes, if you move from this partial pre-funding up to full pre-funding, it will not take longer than 5 years to get to the full trust rate. And at the district's option, you can throw in some extra money in 1 year to try and accelerate getting that average up to 100% faster.
No, I'd be very interested. So in the future, Mr. O'Toole, I think it'd be really good, at least for the finance committee, to take a look at what funding is going to take to keep us out of that blending discount and to get us to that 20-year full.
The implicit. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? All right.
Before I stop, then I was also asked to make a comment about one other thing, and that was I've just changed my slide here. If we could prepare some information summarizing kind of where the district stands in terms of our understanding of where the other agencies are in their funding. So I've put together just a quick look at our client base. Just for your information, there's roughly 600 public agencies in the CERP program today. And our client base, we provide OPEB actuarial services for about 300 public agencies. Not all of those are in CERP, but the vast majority are. I'd say at least 80% of those are in the CERP program. And we looked at the relative funded percent for those, our current agencies. Of those, we've got about 140 of those 300 that have a trust. So just a hair under 50% of our clients have an OPEB trust. So the first half, their funded percent is 0 because they have no trust. Of the other half that does have a trust, this is relatively where they are on their funding scheme. About 5% have accumulated so much money, they've covered more than the past service liability, they've covered their entire future projected liability. So they're way ahead of the game. About 9% have more than, have some surplus, meaning that they've got assets that are greater than their actuarial accrued liability. So they have 0 unfunded from that point of view. About 14% are somewhere between 75 and 99%. About 22% are between 50 and 74. 28% are between 25 and 49%. And this is where the district is. Remember, you're at 27%. And then 22% have just recently started funding, and they're between 1 and 24%. So that's what you see yourself on the spectrum of our client base, remembering again that there's half of these people, another half of people that have no trust. So even though you're maybe in the lower group where you're between 25 and 49, you're still ahead of another 50% of agencies that haven't started a trustable.
Well, I guess the good news is we're not in last place.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So I wanted to be sure to get that into my discussion. So are there any other questions?
Seeing no more questions, thank you very much, Ms. McLeod.
You're welcome. I will take my leave. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave, for that presentation. Our next item on the agenda is action items. Number 1, disclosure of material expenditure, general property liability insurance. Deputy Chief Bailey and USI insurance broker Brad Svagningsson.
That's really good.
Oh.
That is really good. Good evening, board chair, board of directors, Chief Harms. I'm Ty Bailey, Deputy Chief of our administration. This evening, we're going to present to you our general property and liability insurance. Part of our strategic plan is in 2019, we want to go out and look at what other opportunities are out there, and we did that over the last year. We do have another proposal that came back. However, through the evaluation that we did, we do have the recommendation to stick with the carrier that we are currently using. However, we do see some great opportunities in the future. So I'm going to turn it over to Brad for the presentation.
Thanks for having me. It's good to see you in person again. So we're here to talk about your commercial insurance, and you're currently with SDRMA. They're a risk pool. You pool with other public entities. You've been with SDRMA since 2006, and in summary, they insure all your buildings, contents that you own, insured for $150 million. Your district vehicles insured for $60 million. They provide $10 million of general liability, including employment practices liability and errors and omissions, $10 million of auto liability, $2 million of cyber liability. Your premium last year was around 3.1 million, and the premium this year is around 3.6 million. Wildfire payments, along with increased litigation resulting in high verdicts or settlements, are the driving force of these premium increases. So we started the renewal process back in fall of 2021. FARA, which stands for Fire Agency Insurance Risk Authority, took an interest in providing a quote for Sac Metro Fire. On May 19th, 2022, 1 week ago, I received their quote. And the quote was at 1.85 million, which was much lower than SDRMA. Although both SDRMA and FARA can both get to a 10 million per occurrence limit, the resulting aggregate limits are different. For example, if Sac Metro Fire incurred a $10 million general liability claim, SDRMA carries a $50 million aggregate pool limit, whereas FARA carries a 10 million aggregate limit per member subject to a 1 million per occurrence limit. SDRMA's worst claim year against their aggregate was in the 15 to 16 year. They had 21 million out of a 50 million was used. So it kind of gives you an idea of if everyone had a really bad year, that was the worst in however they've been along, 20 years or so. FARA is a pool of fire agencies up and down the state of California, whereas SDRMA is a blend of public entities, including fire agencies, community services, pest control, recreation and parks, water districts, among several others. For new members joining FARA, there is a 3-year commitment once you join. For example, if you join this July 2022, you must stay in the pool until July 2025. Also, once you have satisfied the 3-year commitment, you must give them 1 year's notice if you want to leave. I received an email from FARA this morning saying they're willing to soften those requirements, but they would need to get approval at their next board meeting. Most of the pools have a 3-year commitment, so that's nothing new when you join them. With SDRMA, we don't have that because we're there. So every April, I opt out of their pool, but I got to let them know by June 1st if we want back in. That's why I'm here at this meeting instead of in June. So if I'm on the board, my first question would be, why did the quotes come in at the last minute? Just trying to anticipate some of your questions. If this was 10 years ago, we'd have the quotes in by early May. Now we're lucky to get them in by late May. All pools use different insurance companies to get their 10 million occurrence. So one insurance company might quote the first million, the next company will take the next 4 million, and then the third company will quote the remaining 5 million. The company quoting the 4 million will wait to get the pricing in terms of the first million, so they know what coverages or exclusions the 1 million company is using, because they need to provide the same coverage as that quote. So it gets kind of a tiered thing. And if it was early May, it's more doable. Late May, it's a struggle. So that's kind of the summary that I have. I'm sure you can have some questions on this.
Go ahead.
Brett, thank you very much for that information. And the fact that we're in a pool and we have a worse year, did we carve out that worse year and determine which members of the pool need to be sent away?
They will do that. Yeah, the pool will do that.
Okay.
They'll either price it accordingly or boot them.
Okay.
Yeah, and usually they'll price accordingly.
Great, because I don't see us taking a penalty if it's a specific group of individuals that continue to reoffend and don't do some of the proactive things that we do here at Metro.
Correct.
That we continue to pay an accelerated premium for their errors and omissions.
Yeah, and when we met with FARA back in the fall, they were blown away at your programs that you have in place. I mean, they're really, really impressed. So it was a no-brainer them quoting, and they really want your business. It's just probably not going to happen this year, sounds like, but I've been doing this with you folks for 10 years. The first time we've had a competitive quote. So pretty excited.
How bad do they want our business?
Well, they came back pretty quick with the email on the reduction.
Yeah, but then they have to have a special board meeting, and it's just like, you know.
They do or we do?
No, they do. In order to soften the requirements of the.
Tell them to have one tomorrow. I mean, at the end of the day, if we can get a competitive bid and they're willing to soften some of those requirements, it's saving us $2 million that can go towards an OPEB liability that we just talked about, or something like that.
Right.
I'm seeing if an organization has come together of like entities, the fire service, we have a vested interest in ensuring that we do things safely and eliminate our risks way more than other public agencies. So I think it's great that we've got that competitive bid, but I put the screws to them a little bit to see how we can, because I'm sure we're going to be one of the bigger fish in the bucket.
Yeah, you would be the second biggest.
Yeah, Orange County is the largest currently.
Yeah.
They're not really a district, though. They're authority.
So you like the interest of, you like the idea of being in a pool with other fire agencies versus like a heterogeneous with other public agencies?
I'm not going to
I'm
speak
just
for my
curious.
colleagues, but I think it's actually a great idea because we have a higher standard of training and those kind of things. And so I think at least we ought to do the due diligence, and a special board meeting shouldn't be the thing that stops us from negotiating them softening their offers.
Well, and again, these pools are not apples and apples. There's a little bit of a difference. Okay, so SDRMA is a bigger pool, and they have a little more room if you have a big claim. You have that 10 million general liability claim. All of a sudden, we need to go out in the marketplace, buy a little more backup. Whereas SDRMA has already got it in place. Okay. So doable, and yeah.
I like the word doable.
Can I just add a couple of things? One, we had a really good conversation with our general counsel, Lavra, fire chief, and our team. And there were differences, and there's a little bit more risk with what they're offering. You know, the saying is you get what you pay for, but I think we can get there over time. I just don't know if we get there at this board meeting today. What I would say is that the recommendation is to move forward with SDRMA, and over the next 12 months, but specifically starting in January of 23, we start to look at maybe we can bring other agencies in as well now that FARA is, and make it more competitive. And I think General Counsel Lavra could weigh into this, because we did evaluate what are you getting today and what are you going to get with this current offer that's on the table. So it's the whole risk management. Yeah. You want to take the risk today and not have, maybe you don't have that $30 million lawsuit, but if you do, what does that mean for the OPEB funding on the other side?
I hear you. I just like the fact that we've got a competitor in the market. We ought to take the maximum advantage of it because
I agree.
They want our business. And Orange County obviously has vetted them as well and understands some of the risks that presents, and they're still willing to move in that direction. So that there's like agencies with the same kinds of risk reductions that we take pride in.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Anyone?
Yeah, just one quick question on discount incentives. Is there a direct comparison between the two as far as percentage of discount incentives for the proactive programs that the fire department does have?
You mean on like premium, what they're going to charge?
Premium discount incentives.
Well, I can tell you that, yeah, FARA, that's why they priced it so low, is because they were very impressed with what you have in place. And that's why they gave you that quote. Now, the thing that kind of scares me before I got that email this morning, which is not concrete, it's like, well, you're stuck for 3 years, which, okay, that's fine, but give us a cap. Okay, let's, you know, if maybe it's loss ratio driven, maybe not. Maybe you say, maybe we get two options. If your loss ratio is X amount, you're going to cap it here. If we have a bad year, you're never going to give us more than, you know, 40% or 30% or whatever. That makes it doable for me, for sure. So I don't know. I don't get paid by either of these pools, so I'm just trying to get what's the best for you. So,
Madam Chair, quick question. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's for about 1.8 million, we get a one-time potential payout on an annual basis of 10 million. But if we pay 3.6, it's 50 million. Is that the bottom line?
But no more than 10 million per occurrence. It's just you wouldn't have used up your 10 million. Then you would have dropped down on the general liability option. Okay, so you would drop back down to the 1 million per occurrence. So
please repeat that.
So if you
just say the same words.
If you had a 10 million general liability claim,
yeah,
someone was successful in getting that, you would lose that $9 million umbrella that they do on top of the 1 million, and you go back to just 1 million per occurrence, and that's all you'd have. You'd only have $1 million in the bucket.
Okay.
So we would need to have someone in the marketplace give us another 10 million on top of it. So maybe it's 300,000, which is still a good deal, but
yeah. I think that idea of taking this next year and looking at it and working at it, I don't feel like I want to be rushed on something. We've been with SDMRA, I mean, been around for such a long time. And so many special districts obviously take advantage of it. I get nervous when I think about being rushed for something about insurance. I go way over to my conservative side on that. So anyway, I'm prepared to support the staff recommendation.
Is there any more comments, discussions, or questions?
I just add one more thing. I want to thank Michelle Dehoney and HR for all of her assistance through this process.
Very much so.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle. So can I get a motion that will support staff's recommendation?
Madam Chair, I make a motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion on the table and a second. Can I get you to call the roll, please? Thank you.
Director Gould.
Aye.
Orzali.
Aye.
Wood.
Aye.
Sheets. Aye. Kelly.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
White.
Aye.
Clark, I do not believe has joined us. And Sailors.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Our next action item on the agenda is the equipment lease financing. CFO Dave O'Toole.
Me again?
You are the man of the night here.
Seen a lot of me tonight. Thank you, Madam Chair, board members, Chief Harms. This item, equipment lease financing, is brought to you today for an approval to enter into an equipment lease with JP Morgan Chase. In April of this year, staff received 6 qualified responses to our solicitation for equipment leasing. And after a review of these proposals, staff recommends that the district enter in an equipment lease agreement with JP Morgan Chase based on providing the lowest overall cost and terms acceptable to the district. These vehicles and equipment will be added to the master lease agreement. under a new lease schedule and an associated payment schedule over the next 5 years. A payment schedule is included in the draft agreement. The interest rate for the proposed financing is 2.381%. Annual payments over the 5-year term of financing would be approximately $709,000, with the first semi-annual payment due in fiscal year 22-23. The resolution before you would approve execution of a lease purchase agreements in a principal amount not exceeding $6.7 million for the purpose of acquiring fire apparatus and vehicles. Before I conclude, I just want to note that it was brought to my attention today that the draft lease agreement prepared by JP Morgan and included in your agenda listed the city of Sacramento as the location. So that's not correct. That would be corrected to county of Sacramento. With that, I answer any questions.
Do you have any questions? You have it. Go ahead.
Mr. O'Toole, thanks so much. I absolutely agree. I have no qualms with, we absolutely need the equipment. The concern I have, and I just want to get your input on is, when I first started on this board in 2013, debt service wasn't an item that we saw on our pie charts and our financial reports. And we learned earlier today that it's already up to 1.8% of our annual budget. So adding another 6.6 million to that is going to bump that number up. What are we looking at down the road in the coming years to make sure that we're not constantly in this need to finance and ever increasing our debt service as a share of our overall budget?
Well, I think we have assumed a practice exactly as you say. We do typically 5-year finances of vehicles and that sort of thing. If we, that's a decision. That's a pretty deep decision. If you want to cease doing that and the implications for that, for where we would find the money for that. It's not atypical to do this kind of financing. It has been going on for years in other districts too, but probably above my pay grade to make that call right now.
It just seems to be getting to be a bigger piece of our pie is what my concern is, which leaves us less money for other things that we need to do, like the other projects in the CIP and other commitments that we need to make, which include our OPEB.
Director Wood?
Yeah.
I think one of the advantages that we have is that we have not extended out past the 5 years. And I agree, is if we can do it, how could we eliminate those? Being here 6 years now, what I see is those purchases we made in the beginning are falling off as we're paying off the front end of those. So each year it has either gone up a little bit, and there's been some years that we've had less financing, and then the last few years it's been 2%. So it's been very cheap for us to be able to do the financing side of it. And again, part of it is falling off. It would be, but if you look at the capital program that was brought forward, I think we had $80 million of needs across the district. And if you remember back when we looked at apparatus, it was the right decision, but we bought a lot of apparatus all at once. And the ability for us to get ahead of that out and try to spread it out and not have to have large payment at once had become critical for us to be able to do that. And that's why we've been able to continue to do it, was the amount. And then as things fall off, we have continued forward to make sure we get our fleet and some of the other projects that we have to be able to move forward.
It's been good, like you said, since we had the lower interest rates. I agree. It just, with interest rates moving in a different direction now, I would like to see some better or more thought, I should say, not better, but more thought, some thought going into how do we change this going forward, because it will get to a point where it becomes cost prohibitive to continue that sort of funding. So, but otherwise, thanks.
I will just add in the earlier presentation in the Finance and Audit Committee, which will be bringing back to the board in a couple weeks. We are including in our forecast the substantially increased cost of borrowing. Be able to see that.
Right, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. Can I get a motion and a second on this item?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we adopt
Second.
for equipment lease finance.
And we have a motion and a second.
Director Gould.
Aye.
Orzali.
Aye.
Wood.
Aye.
Sheets.
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
White.
Aye.
And Sailors.
Aye.
Motion passes.
The next thing on our agenda is reports. President's report, I have none. Fire chief's report.
Good evening, directors and all of the members that are here tonight. Thank you for being here. The first report is on recruitment. There's a single role paramedic recruitment that has gone out that closes on June 15th. The second one is as far as meetings. I was able to attend the International Association of Fire Chief Metro Chiefs Conference last week. Interesting part of that is that it is normally, it's the largest departments in the United States and kind of across a section of Europe. The first day and a half, what they looked at was DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and actually had an individual from outside the fire service, but has been studying the fire service, come in and do a presentation, and had all the fire chiefs be involved in a number of opportunities there. I think my takeaway from it was, like always, there's things that we are, as an organization, have done well, but there was a lot of opportunity of what we are doing today and being able to communicate and work together to move the department forward when we look at that diversity and equity and inclusion across the organization. Yesterday, we had a labor management meeting. We talked about the fire season coming up and the deployment of apparatus. As always, it has started early already as far as fires across the region. We saw some down in Orange County. The expectation is, as the last few years, is that it'll be a very busy fire season as we move forward. One of the other ones that we talked about and spent quite a bit of time on was about the service delivery team. And if you remember a while back, John Rudnicki and Mike Gildone came in and talked. I think Mike is here today. They came in and talked about the service delivery team. And one of the first goals that we looked at was the 21 recruits that are in the SAFER program, and those positions that they will be coming out of the academy at the beginning of July, and then they'll count as staffing at the beginning of August. That group will bring forward their recommendations on June 1st, and that'll give us an opportunity to review those recommendations and implement those, being able to move forward with the SAFER positions. Another one of the goals that was in there is a 5-year plan, and within the 5-year plan, we wanted to look at really EMS and our ambulance service. We've talked a lot about the single role program. We've talked about BLS ambulances. What we did in the meeting the other day was move that priority up, and we want to see something as far as the deployment on November 1st. It may be a pilot program where we try BLS ambulances, or we try to look at the deployment of rigs across our district. But our goal has now been November 1st for implementing that EMS side of things for me moving forward. Jeff Fry, myself, and Ty Bailey have been meeting with the County Board of Supervisors, and then the elected from Citrus Heights, and trying to move forward with our impact fees, and being able to be in a position that those are on the county board agenda before July 1st. And if you remember during the presentation, that July 1st date is critical for us, that really the mechanism for the way that they are figured changes. So we've had a number of meetings that have been positive. We've also had some meetings that unfortunately were canceled, but we're moving forward with those. Also last night, we had the awards gala. It honored the members of the 2021. The last time that we'd had the awards gala was in 2019. It's a peer recommendation and commendations that are brought forward by the peers. It was well attended. It was nice to be back in person. Thank you to the directors that were able to make it there last night. But it was really nice again, as we come around the corner for COVID, to be back in a position to be able to be out there. Jason Cahill was the suppression member of the year. Ken Lee from IT was the professional staff member of the year. Fitz Butler was the special operations member of the year. And I think Chief Law is going to talk to us tonight. Chief Law was awarded the EMS employee of the year. So congratulations to each one of those. There was a number of other folks that were recognized, a number of folks that were recognized on the operations side for the work that they'd done over the past year. The last thing that I have is that Chiefs Forums is where twice a year we sit down with all the members and go through really one-on-one or in small groups of what has been happening and what the next year looks like. It starts on June, like the 6th or the 8th, and there's, I think, 18 of those that are scheduled coming up. That ends my report unless you have any questions.
Does anyone have questions?
And I know it says that Chief Mitchell is on there, but Chief Law is going to do the operations report for us tonight.
Good evening, directors, Chief Harms, and all of the membership and your families. It's nice to see this level of engagement in the ongoing of the district. So thank you everyone for being here. I'm here tonight with the operations report. Since last week when we met on May 12th, we've had a total of 4,449 incidents, which is up a little bit from our last report, and we've got an average of 317 calls per day. Excuse me. By incident type, we had 2,859 medical aids, which is running consistent at about 64% of our calls, or an average of 204 calls per day. We've had 195 fire incidents, which is an average of 14 fires per day. Since our last meeting, we've had two significant events. Unfortunately, on May 19th in Battalion 7, crews responded to a residential structure fire in a McEwen, which is a fourplex building. Despite aggressive search tactics and firefighting, we did have a 3-year-old that succumbed to that fire. The investigation of that fire is ongoing at this time, and it is a joint effort between the Sheriff's Department and our arson investigators. So more to follow on that in future meetings. Last night in Battalion 5, we did have a commercial structure fire where the sprinkler system activated and actually held that fire in control. Our arson investigators determined that that was started by improperly stored rags or with wood staining products on them. The business was inspected. There were found to be a number of code enforcement violations, and so community risk reduction is working with the building owner, but the building or the I am drawing a complete blank. Business, thank you. The business is closed at this time, and CRD will be working with them on correcting the code violations so that they can get back into service as soon as possible. From the training division, we still are in the Fire Academy. They're working on Mod 2 for their testing tomorrow. They're holding steady at 38 recruits with 19 paramedics and 19 EMTs in that class. There are a number of folks in the 19 EMTs that are already in a paramedic process, and so we will be working with them to get them through internships as soon as possible once they hit the line, so that's good news. And finally, today we've transitioned to wildland season with our upstaffing of the copter and the dozer program. And that is the end of my report, unless you have any questions.
Does anyone have any questions or comments? Thank you very much for that report.
Thanks.
Next, we have Firefighters Local 522 report, BC Matt Cole.
Good evening, President sailors, members of the board. Before we start, I'd like to take a moment of silence for the horrible act that took place in Uvalde, Texas, the 19 children and the 2 adults that were lost. So please, a moment of silence. Thank you. It's hard to go on with normal business when things like that are happening in our world, but we have to. So I'm going to do my best with this report, even though that just got my heart rate up a little bit. And I'm going to speak loudly because I understand not everybody in the back of the room can hear us. So there's a number of really positive things that are happening, and I could spend some time going over those in my 522 report as far as the hard work that our members are putting in on fires and medical aids. We could talk about being at CPF convention for the first time since COVID, the CFED conference that I was just able to go to, the unit meeting we had today. But I'd really like to spend the couple minutes speaking to each of you. So the last few years have provided unprecedented challenges for our communities, for public safety as a whole, us and our brothers and sisters in law enforcement. But for the fire service and Metro Fire specifically, we haven't seen challenges like this. So I'd like to thank all of you for giving our membership your ear, being willing to come and connect with us at our firehouses and in our divisions to listen to how these challenges have been impacting all of us and our families on a regular basis. We know that tonight you'll be talking about the Metro Fire. We saw it agendized on the agenda for tonight's meeting. And here we have the men and women of Metro Fire, their wives, their husbands, their boyfriends, their families, those that continually sacrifice, pick up extra shifts, deal with those fires that are always increasing, deal with our homeless and their behavioral health issues, deal with unprecedented challenges at a time when everything seems to be kind of falling apart. And so we have felt your support through the years as we've been entrusted to meet these challenges and continue to rise to the occasion on behalf of the community. You have been there for us, and we've been carrying a fair amount of responsibility, and sometimes that's tough. So similarly, we know that the responsibility cast on you to ensure that Metro Fire is strong into the future is significant. And so we are in the room to show you that we support you as well as you have for us. So we stand here, union strong, united, supporting you, and we thank you for everything that you have done for us. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Local 522 for that presentation. And I would just like to say I am happy to see the room full tonight. It is a pleasure to see the engagement from everyone. I would also like to see at union meetings this kind of engagement.
It was pretty close today, honestly.
Okay, good for that. It goes both ways. So we're here working for all of you, and you're out there working for the people that put us up here. So that's why we're here, is to serve our community. So thank you for everything you do. Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is committee and delegate reports. The executive committee has met last board meeting, and it is to be determined. The next item is Communication Center JPA.
Good evening, President Sailors. The concert JPA has not met since our last meeting, so I do not have a report for you tonight. However, I will be reporting out after our next meeting, which is on June 14th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next item on the agenda is California Fire and Rescue Training JPA. Chief Harms.
Directors, we met yesterday afternoon. All classes at the JPA have been completed. At this time, actually today, OES has given us a statement they don't want any of the resources that are left at the location. City Fire and John Rudnicki, the training division, met earlier today and went through all of the assets that are left and divided up assets. There will be one more meeting that will occur in late June. It looks like there'll be probably a financial balance of about $200,000 that will be divided between the three agencies moving forward. The last item that is trying to be taken care of that's under the JPA is the removal of the airplane. And so there's still some struggles with getting that off of the property. It has been identified that all the fuel has been removed, but it will be removed before the end of June. That ends my report.
Thank you. Next item is Finance and Audit Committee, Director Orzali.
Thank you. This evening, the Finance and Audit Committee received a report from CFO O'Toole on the preliminary budget. And additionally, we received a report involving the capital improvements plan, again from CFO O'Toole and Jeff Fry. Both excellent reports, and we're very much appreciative of all the effort that went into them. Our next meeting is on 23 June 2022 in this chamber. Thank you.
Next is the policy committee. Director Gould.
No report.
No report. Thank you. We now have board member questions and comments. Director Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No comments tonight.
Thank you. Director Kelly.
I'd like to thank Ms. McLeod for the report she gave on the unfunded liabilities. I'm glad that the room was full to hear that report, understand how important it is for the district to continue its payments and increase those payments to get ahead of that unfunded liability. Other than that, everybody enjoy a nice Memorial Day weekend.
Thank you, Director Kelly. Director Sheets.
Good evening. I just want to thank everybody for your engagement. It's really awesome to see how much support you guys have being unified for Local 522. I want to send my condolences to all of the families that have been affected by the shooting in Texas. I wish everybody a safe and happy Memorial Day weekend, and recognize the members who will be away from their family this weekend. Just keep them in their thoughts and prayers and make sure that they're safe. That's it.
Thank you. Director Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Got a few things. First of all, I was honored to be at the awards gala last night. It was incredibly inspiring to hear the stories that our members, the activities and the work that they do that got them to get those recognitions from their peers. Stories like Engineer Tyler Williamson's life-saving, something that was it just had our table. We were pretty moved by it, but it's a story that unfortunately we don't hear about up here too often. It happens all the time in your work, but it doesn't get up. And so I'd love for those stories to get up through the captains and up through the ranks so we can get people like Tyler Williamson here and recognize them as well here as with you guys at these annual meetings. So I'd like to see more of that. It was a great dinner, great opportunity. Yeah, it was absolutely awesome. Chance to see you guys sometimes and recognize you, but we don't get enough opportunities to do that here in person. So keep those stories, get them up, push them up so that they can get on our meetings and get you guys here to talk about that. Also, I don't know why, but for some reason last week, I've been seeing a lot of information about us in the media, a lot on Instagram. And Captain Wilburn, just want to say you're just doing an awesome job. PIO, your staff, the people you got working with you, just doing absolutely phenomenal work. So it's good to see that. Firefighter White, I said it earlier, thanks for your presentation. It was really good. When I started on this board back in 2013, we've had, and before then we were having 800,000 people for a class, and we're not getting 10% of those numbers now. So what you're doing is I know it's a year off your engine and it might be a little frustrating at times, but you've got one of the most important jobs here right now working towards securing the future. So thank you for all you do. And last, I just want to say thanks to Captain Mike Bonham and the crew at 54, Ray and Sean, for hosting me the other day. I had a great talk with them and appreciated their time and their hospitality. So thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Director Rosali.
Yeah, very briefly, I wanted to express my appreciation to C-Shift at Station 27. I really appreciated the opportunity to sit down with you guys and talk about how you see us and how we see you and so on and so forth. It was a great evening. Also, I want to thank the members of 522 for this showing this evening. It's important. It means a lot to us. It's something that we haven't seen, and it's recognized and well worth your time. So thank you.
Thank you. Director Gould.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just really quickly, first off, I'd like to thank the apparent posse of firefighter Tim White for being here. Appreciate all the efforts that you put in, and especially encouraging to see families here tonight. I know it's quite a sacrifice to keep them quiet during OPEB presentations. I'd like to thank the crew at Station 25 for some outstanding fish tacos, and also all the men and women that participated and were part of the planning and development of the auto extrication training that went on. I had an opportunity to get a sunburn out there. I think it was yesterday, and it was pretty fabulous. I'd just like to encourage this organization to fund that skill set at the highest levels that we can, because that's a pretty particular skill set. Those men and women out there doing some incredible things. We need to make sure that we provide them training funds that can get them to where they need to be. That also encourages us to look at developing partnerships with heavy wreckers. Some of the work that those heavy wreckers were doing yesterday was impressive. We need to figure out a way to get them into our response queue so that they can be there. And from what I saw, I would much rather have a wrecker holding onto that tractor trailer rig and crawling underneath it to save somebody's life than some block and tackle thing. I don't know what it's called. It didn't look very cool compared to a $1 million truck. So I would just encourage us to not let the politics get in the way. I know that we've got some pretty incredible community members that are willing to play nice with us in that regard. And I think it's high time we get those folks as part of our rescue team and our auto extrication. It was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. By the way, those battery operated devices are freaking heavy. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Director Gould. Director White.
Okay, first I just want to commend last night's award recipients for their actions, their efforts, their hard work. I wish I could have been there, but I do want to say thank you. To get recognized by your peers is pretty significant. So second, I got an opportunity to go to the Academy drill grounds and observe the fireground training that was going on. I was very impressed by not only the quality of the cadre, but the efficiency at which they were running the academy. So I want to say thank you for that. And thanks to Chief Barthel, Captain Malinowski, and the crew at 50 for and especially Chef Hazlett for dinner the other night. So thank you. And just want to wish everyone a happy, healthy, and safe Memorial Weekend.
Thank you. And as my voice is going out, I just wanted to extend a big thank you to the crew at Station 41 who tolerated listening to my war stories last Thursday. They invited me for dinner, and of course I didn't eat. I just bored them with old war stories. So, and thank everyone for your presentations tonight. And now we get to go to closed session, and you guys all get to go home and have a great holiday weekend.
Chair, can I ask for 10 minutes?
Yeah, little break. Yeah.
Yeah. Take it over.
Are we good? Thank you, President Saylor. The board met in closed session for conference with the labor negotiator designated by the district for the labor organizations identified in the agenda. No reportable action was taken. The board also met in closed session with respect to public employee performance evaluation for the fire chief. No reportable action was taken.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned. Have a good night, everyone. Have a good weekend.
See you tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay.